Welcome into another live edition of the Play-by-Play, a sports media talk show from Awful Announcing, where we will just be talking until about 1 o'clock Eastern, just like Netflix did on Saturday night. Ben, you got the next, what is that, 13 hours? You ready?
Well, we would start at 1 a.m. Eastern, and then we wouldn't be done until like 1:45 Eastern if we were following
exactly.
the Zuffa boxing model. So yeah, I'll set, if you're going to tell me we're going to end at 1 a.m., I'll take that right now.
Perfect. Well, I'm Brendan Clean. That's Ben Axelrod. We're back. Week 3 of the college football season in the books. Week 2 of the NFL season in the books. We'll start there. Later on, how Pablo Torre cracked the code as he breaks more news across the sports world, this time focused on the Los Angeles Clippers. But we are bringing back, Ben, to kick things off here, Stock Watch, which is our segment from the longer format we used to do here on the Play-by-Play. What is sports media thinking about a given topic? Where were they? Where are they now? Where are they going? And I feel like these are two quarterbacks who this segment was made for. We're going to go in on Arch Manning and Caleb Williams. Let's start in Texas, Ben, because this is the probably most hyped call. Like, Paul Feinbaum said this was the most generationally talented quarterback, or in all ways, shapes, and forms since Tim Tebow. I would say he's at least the most talked about since Tim Tebow, and that was very true. And the wheels are already falling off here. He gets booed at home, despite winning 27-10. We know how the Ohio State game went in week 1. Feinbaum's off the bus completely. It's over, he said. Any sort of high-end outcome is done. Dan Wolken at Yahoo's writing that Texas may not even make the college football playoff. I mean, that's just a smattering. You just go online, and it's ugly. Where do you fall on the spectrum of, like, he was just hyped because of the family and the school and the pedigree and the NIL, to he actually was that good and he's just legitimately underperforming as an athlete?
Probably closer to the latter. I think that, like, you know, the comparison I always see get thrown around on social media and the memes is Bronny James. Like, I don't think this is a Bronny James NBA situation where, you know, you can make a pretty compelling case that he's only there because of his name. I mean, Arch Manning was the number 1 overall recruit in his class. Now, is he, you know, a 5-star prospect who was really a 4-star prospect, but got that boost because of who he is? Possibly. But, like, he was a legitimately, like, highly touted player based on his own accolades. But I think the name helps as well. I mean, I think if anything's close, then you do kind of default to the name. Where I'm at with it, though, is, like, he's just not a part of the discourse anymore. Like, to me, like, if you're still talking about Arch Manning, you're kind of chasing those clicks. You're forcing a conversation. Like, he is a name who people are going to talk about. I'm sure we're going to continue to write about him in some form or fashion, but, like, to have any sort of discussion about him in the context of being a future number 1 overall pick or even a Heisman contender or anything like that, like, to me, that's not the conversation right now. That's not one that's rooted in reality. So, you know, a lot can change. They still have, like, any talk about them missing the playoff is kind of crazy because, as we saw a year ago, like, all you need to do is to win your conference. So we could very well be in a situation where, like, they blow out Oklahoma and we're back to Arch mania. But right now, to me, he's just not a part of the conversation.
How much do you think that other stuff did affect the preseason expectations, though? Like, the fact that he's a Manning, the fact that it's Texas, that's why I made the distinction that I did, like, versus Tebow or whatever. Like, I have no idea. I'm not going to pretend that I watched him in high school. I think I saw a few plays where he took snaps last season. I don't know what I'm talking about, right? But, like, I do see people saying, like, you know, the throwing mechanics, he's doing Matthew Stafford throws every single play out there for whatever reason. They're being a little bit opaque about the injury that he may or may not have. Like, I can see arguments on both sides, but I do come back to the fact that we were talking about this guy like he was more guaranteed, when at the same time I've watched guys like Cam Newton or Joe Burrow start with nothing or relatively little fanfare and wow us in the other direction. So I do have to like try to sort through why we let it get so out of control before we ever really watched him play against elite competition. And I think that there's definitely something valid to the people who are like, shut up. He was just another quarterback, and you guys just made him out to be something and put millions of dollars in his pockets because of his family before we ever knew anything about his quality of play.
Oh, that part of it, I think, is primarily based on his name. Like the stuff where Paul Feinbaum's saying he's already the best college quarterback since Tim Tebow. And then the other part of that, and I wrote about this a little bit for Awful Announcing, is then you started to get he became one of those names where it was like you have to have an Arch Manning take. And so you have Paul Feinbaum getting out there being super pro Arch Manning the way that Skip Bayless was super pro Tim Tebow. And then you also have Jordan Rodgers coming in, and you even saw it before the Ohio State game, kind of staking his claim to being anti-Arch Manning and treating Arch the way that Stephen A. Smith, I mean, he invoked this comparison exactly, treating Arch Manning the way that Stephen A. Smith treats the Dallas Cowboys. So he was one of those names who it was like, all right, if you're in the takes industry, you have to have a take on Arch Manning. And I think that part of it, I mean, even as highly as recruited as he was, like Quinn Ewers, the quarterback before him at Texas, was even more highly touted, and he never got any sort of this sort of buzz preseason or otherwise in terms of being a famous person in college football. So I think that aspect of it, and I was kind of looking at it as a whole going back to when he was in high school. But if you just want to break this down to the last, 6 months since Quinn Ewers left Texas and it became clear that this was going to be Arch Manning's team, to me, all of that hype and all of that discussion is primarily rooted in what his last name is.
It's just fascinating, and the reason I think we're doing we pick topics for a segment like this is like that inevitably traces back to now why he's getting booed in week 3 and all these sorts of things. Like, it's an expectations game completely, and those are all created by the media. So it's this weird trickle down where it's inflated because of his name. Fans then have to kind of respond to that baseline of expectation. It's a weird spot for him to be in and a weird spot for that program to be in, given that none of it was actually really based on the play on the field. I mean, there were people who study this stuff who would have told you he looked really, really great, but, most guys have a lot more time to feel it out before we have any sort of big thoughts on them. Let's go to Caleb Williams, another player who I think was in a very similar spot not too long ago, Ben. Not a famous name, but one of those guys, and obviously went number 1 overall and had the Heisman season and did what he did in college, but now is facing similar backlash. So he had another pretty poor performance in Game 2 under new head coach Ben Johnson in Chicago. Horrendous interception that went viral. I say that, but I was there for Kyler Murray doing the exact same thing, and no one really seemed to notice that. So a bad interception and an even worse loss, 31 to the Lions in Detroit. Let's just pick up where we left off with the last one here, which is, do you think this is a similar pattern as Arch, where expectations just got out of proportion? Or do you think that some of these other things are leading to it being such a beatdown on Caleb Williams? The other things meaning the pre-draft stories, the way he handles himself publicly and in the media, that type of thing. What do you think explains the dialogue and the media narrative around Caleb right now, early in his second season?
I think it's very similar. I think, like, if you look at American society in terms of sports and like the way we prop up quarterbacks, this is actually like pretty fitting with the Seth Wickersham book that just came out. But like, quarterbacks are like our highest form of like sports celebrity nowadays, it seems like. And we're always like, we'll always have Josh Allen. We'll always have Patrick Mahomes. When he's healthy, we'll always have Joe Burrow. Like, we'll always have these set quarterbacks. But then there are these other quarterbacks like Arch Manning because of his name, like Caleb Williams because of, I'd say, his pedigree and his personality, where if Caleb Williams panned out as a number 1 overall pick, especially playing in Chicago, which is a major media market that has been starved for a quarterback for its entirety existence as a franchise, like it would be a huge deal if these guys panned out. And so the fact that they're not going to pan out, like it's fine. We'll just replace them. We'll find a Jaden Daniels, or we'll find a Grant Nussmeier to fill the void that those guys are leaving. But it would be a really big deal if those guys did pan out, because they already come with this like prepackaged celebrity to them. So I think with Caleb, it's similar. I think there's stuff about the way he handled his college career. He was really kind of the first quarterback of the NIL era to just kind of pick up and say, all right, I played well at Oklahoma. Now I'm going to follow my coach to USC. He wins a Heisman. He spends, there's all this, the pre-draft stuff. There's the TD Go Long article that came out just before the start of this season that had some inflammatory stuff in it. So I think a lot of it is similar, but for different reasons. But these are quarterbacks who have a pre-level of celebrity who make it so there's always going to be this additional spotlight on them, regardless of how they're performing.
It does feel like a new phenomenon. Like I agree. And it's different, right? It's not the name. It's not, the same school or exactly the same circumstances, given that, we didn't have the 2 years of buildup at school with Caleb the same way we did with Arch and all those things. Like it's not 1-to-1, but I do think that there's something new here where we're seeing the beginnings of what it will look like for these kids to be actual like famous superstars, the way that a Tom Brady or whatever might have been in the past, but at 19, 20 instead of 27, and what does that do with the expectations game and the fan reception and even how they're viewed in a locker room? Are they able to make mistakes? Like you talk about that Tyler Dunn article, it's been kind of crazy to me, and like something I hope doesn't happen with Arch, where Sark's been pretty over the top defending and trying to, bring him along with the training wheels in Texas, but people seem so ready to leak bad stuff on Caleb and bash him. And I don't know the situation enough, and I'm not in Chicago or Oklahoma or LA to know the details all the way through to say that Tyler's reporting is exactly perfect in every single place. I know people have questioned it a little bit, but it's just the fact of an article like that even existing, a series of articles, and a bunch of similar ones all the way through his tenure, that seems crazy to me. And I just have a hard time imagining he's such a more, image-minded or argumentative or flashy for the sake of whatever thing. I don't think he's more of any of those things than anybody who's come before him, and yet what could be a pretty inconsequential career, like he could just suck. Yeah. And we would just forget about Caleb Williams in 10 years. And yet in the moment, you'd think he's like the villain of the NFL. It's a little weird the way that has come out in such full force.
Yeah, and I don't know. I wonder if there's a part of it where last season he came in with these, expectations and all this hype, and then last season went as poorly as it did. And now there's this idea like, okay, you got like the quarterback whisperer, you got the mastermind behind the Detroit Lions offense as your head coach. Like this is the most QB friendly system, the most QB friendly head coach. Like now you're out of excuses. Like they invested in the offensive line, they invested in the receivers. Like this is it. So I don't know if there's an era of like, this is your last shot and now it's all on you, but it does seem like there is some, for lack of a better term, like level of villain that's been attached to him as a quarterback. And I don't understand where it comes from either, other than potentially the idea that he's just like the first of his generation, age wise, and that we're not used to dealing with kids of his age at this point.
Yeah. I mean, some of it's probably the LA, the Chicago of it. Yeah. But like I mentioned, Kyler, he came out here. We had the video game controversy stuff when he was about to sign his contract, which was goofy noise and not nearly as like aggressive as some of the Caleb coverage. But mostly people just don't care about Kyler Murray anymore. Like he's just not really a character in the national media much, despite, I mean, literally going to the same school and in some cases having like, hype at some points along his trajectory, having a similar level of hype. Trevor Lawrence is going through it. Justin Herbert, like these guys, it just doesn't come back to bite them the same way. It's very fascinating. Let's get into it. The legend of Pablo Torre grows. I wrote about this for Awful Announcing today, Ben, on the site, and it was something I really actually took like multiple days to write and something I had been stewing on for much longer. And the Clippers story that he broke the past couple of weeks was a perfect opportunity, I think, to explore it, to recap what that was. Connecting dots, basically, through his podcast, Pablo Torre finds out that allegedly show questionable business dealings between a Clippers sponsor that was in the climate change, carbon credit space, and the Clippers team and their owners, that if proven to be what they look like, would be, clear salary cap circumvention, big time rule breaking by the Clippers, Kawhi Leonard, the company, whoever might be implicated when it's all said and done. The NBA's launched an investigation, and this has just been the entire, it's September. There's no basketball story usually this time of year, but this has become the big news in the basketball world. But what my article mostly was talking about was like the way that Pablo kind of handles himself and has kind of turned himself into a cause de celeb or a folk hero or whatever you want to kind of term it as. Somebody who has like not just an audience, but a fan base as an investigative reporter, as somebody who basically does like what, Don Van Natta or like Bob Woodward does. Like people who are usually names, but never celebrities or, popular in this way. So what have you made of how Pablo has kind of created that niche for himself in addition to doing like breaking news, big time work that matters?
Well, I'll turn this around on you. And I want to know, like, if you think this is something that Pablo is like intentionally doing, and he's saying like, okay, I need to like promote my work, and this is how my investigative work is going to be different from what Don Van Natta is doing at ESPN. So I'm going to promote it in this way. Or do you think it's just like, I think Pablo is a couple of years older than me. So he's like, an older millennial, like, but he's online, like he speaks online. So is this just how somebody who is, I think he's like 39 years old. This is how somebody who's 39 years old would promote their work, and how this is how, it's largely how he has engaged with his audience throughout his career, whether he's doing this sort of work or not. Obviously it's more, it's louder and it's more, it's under a brighter spotlight because of the work.
And it's just like,
it's not a departure for him.
No, but what he's doing is a departure, right? Like this is a guy who wrote magazine features, hosted a goofy show with Bomani Jones, would be in Miami with Le Batard. The stuff he did was fairly thematically similar to the type of guy he might be online, whereas now, like, he's kind of in this space where you're supposed to shut up and dribble a little bit, right? Like you're kind of just supposed to put your head down, let the work speak for itself. Like you're in legal crossfire. You're making very, like, Steve Ballmer's a rich fucking guy. Like you're supposed to just let the lawyers talk to Ballmer if they need to and publish your next article when it's ready, and we'll hear from you then, right? Like I think that's why I thought it was an interesting topic, because like fill in the blank with your favorite content creator. Like just Dave Portnoy. Like, of course he's everywhere. He plays the game. He fights with people and posts videos and calls and harasses reporters and whatever. But like, that's because he's going to tell you to bet on the Panthers and then like eat a piece of pizza. That's a different type. That makes sense. This is like a collision of two worlds that aren't supposed to go together. But my take was in the piece, like, I think you have to do this in order for work like that to reach the level that Pablo's has.
And I also think it helps that Mark Cuban seems happy to just like string this along. And like Mark Cuban keeps giving him almost the perfect foil to like not only re-prop up his reporting, but also like emphasize and strengthen it. And like I don't really understand what Mark Cuban is doing or why he's doing it. But yeah, I think like it has just created almost this perfect storm where Pablo can keep, a story that came out a week ago now or close to a week ago, like it has a longer shelf life because Mark Cuban keeps trying to argue with him about it for some reason.
It definitely like part of it's just like that self-defense aspect, right? Like if people are going to keep coming out so vocally to pick apart his reporting and amplify these really minor disagreements that they might have or like elements that they think have holes in them, like I think it's human nature to kind of address that in some ways. And like I don't think that part is so different than how another reporter might handle their business. Like everybody kind of you release a big story, you have a big scoop, you give a important take or whatever it might be, like yeah, you're going to get calls from radio shows or you're going to be on Twitter the next day kind of like commenting on it. But he goes further than that, in my opinion, where he's, I wrote up him like saying this whole story to him is an IQ test for the rest of NBA media to like see, do you fall for the billionaire's side or can you like clearly see the pattern that he's establishing? Things like that, posting memes and GIFs at the subjects of his reporting, like it's much more like sloppy internet drama type of combativeness than I think like, and maybe that is just being his age and growing up the way that he did. And he's 20, 30 years younger than Don Van Natta or Maggie Haberman or whoever you want to like throw out there from the serious journalism world that he's kind of jumping into. But the other part of it that I wanted to give like legitimate airtime to though, Ben, is like, I do think that there is like does this detract from his message in some way? Does this like aggressiveness that he has lead to some pushback that wouldn't be there otherwise? Like there are some benefits to keeping your head down in that way. And I think more seriously than that too, like I think part of why he has to defend himself so much is because, and I want to know if you agree with this, he operates independently. He's doing it on a podcast. It isn't like a newspaper expose the way that, Watergate or something was. Like, do you think he kind of has to defend himself because he's working in a way that's a little, maybe 5% thinner or a little bit more like loose with the certainty than other places might do? Because I've seen that leveled against him, and I don't think it's fully crazy to say.
I think, one, to your first question, like, does it detract? I think as long as he has the goods, he has the goods. So, like, as long as the reporting holds up, I think that's ultimately what matters. And to this point, especially with this story, like, I don't think there's really been anything that's been too strong in opposition of it, other than like Mark Cuban saying, I don't think Steve Ballmer would do this. Like, there hasn't been I haven't seen it, at least, like a strong argument against his reporting.
I guess I wouldn't say that there's been an argument against his reporting, but I guess like I wonder if it can contribute to like an idea that it's kind of like a silly in a way, or like what a younger audience might look at as like relatable. I think that there's an institutional, the stodgy old people in the space might look at as like kind of minimizing the work a little bit. Like, you put it out and then you come take a victory lap and goof around on the internet. It takes the air out of what you put out a little bit. I don't, of course, like, it's hard because I'm
Yeah.
kind of creating a straw man to try to guess why I've seen some of the reactions that I have, but there's definitely been like the mainstream journalism community with a few of these scoops along the way have kind of been like, let's pump the brakes, hold up here, let's make sure we got everything in order before we start piling on the NFLPA or the Clippers.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that probably the bigger concern for me, if I were in his shoes, would be the idea that, like, okay, now, like, is this something you're rooting for? Like, it seems like you have a rooting interest in this story now, as opposed to somebody who's, covering it objectively. I think that's where my concerns about the perception would be. But again, as long as he has the goods, then he has the goods. But yeah, that would be my bigger concern, because I don't know. I don't get the sense he's treating it like a silly story. I actually get the sense he's treating it like a very silly story. I get what you're saying in terms of how he's promoting it. But I don't. I
like,
think
just there's a big scoop, and then you post the Russell Westbrook emoji that he keeps using above it.
Yeah.
And I don't think that like delegitimizes the news that he's breaking, but it does. It's like, is it really important, or is it a gif? Like, I do think that some people can see it that way, where I've said it, like, but I think your point about the rooting interest is a more succinct way of saying what I was trying to get at a little bit in the piece too, where, like, for instance, like, the best example that I could use to kind of highlight that would be, he used, like, some people treat the word collusion, which was kind of at the center of the NFLPA reporting, where a judge ruled that there were things that you could, like, the common person might see as collusion, but that doesn't, by the book of the NFL's CBA, count as collusion. Some people, if you were a reporter in Pablo's position talking about that stuff, you would treat collusion like the word murder, where it's like it's a killing until it's declared to be murder, or it's texts between owners until a judge tells you it's collusion. Whereas Pablo, from moment one of all of that, called it collusion. You know what I mean? Like, put that label that's very legally loaded and would obviously be the kind of end result that might come of his reporting, but wasn't there yet. He basically, like, you hear him talk about it, it was collusion from the jump. So I think some of that stuff is like a little bit of a gray area that he's just fully jumping into. And I think it really works for his audience because it communicates the point of what he's doing really well. Yeah. But it also kind of, again, like a Dan Patrick or, whatever, like these people who have seen a lot of Pablos come through before or whatever, like, they're going to, I think, look at some of that and go, well, hold on, it's not collusion. Why aren't you seeing this through? It leaves them open. It leaves them exposed a little bit.
Yeah. And I think some of that might be, again, him being a younger guy. I mean, I don't know how many other people in his age range are doing this sort of work, at least at this sort of scale. For whatever reason, most of the investigative sports reporters seem to be on the older side. I think it's what works for him, though. Like, this is his brand. I mean, he treats silly stories seriously, and he's part of the Meadowlark universe. Like, this is kind of the Meadowlark ethos still. So I think it works for him. I understand why people would try to poke holes in it. But I think, again, his reporting has been so strong. The fact that he's gotten like these three big stories now this year, kind of the tentpole stories that he's gotten between Jordan Hudson, the NFLPA stuff, and now this, like, I think it speaks for itself. So I don't, I could see where those arguments would come from, but I think it works for him. And I think at this point, his work largely speaks for itself.
The main point, I think, is, with having gone through both sides now, like, it's just remarkable to build a rabid audience around stuff that most people's eyes would glaze over if it was in a different form or from a different person. It's just crazy.
He tweeted, somebody tweeted, like, you need to get on the Epstein list. In terms of finding it, you need to find the Epstein list. And he retweeted it and said, this tweet, actually, versions of this tweet inspired my story tomorrow. and you look at the reactions, the immediate reaction was, oh, he has the Epstein list. And it's like, he didn't have the Epstein list. I never thought he had the Epstein list, but like the fact that he could tweet what he tweeted as vaguely as he did, and the majority conclusion would be, oh, he has the Epstein list, is wild to me. So yeah, I mean, the other part I find funny is he's used this threat against Bill Simmons now, and he's used this threat against Mark Cuban when they've gone after him. And he just says, can you come on the podcast? I have some questions for you. And it's just like the most threatening thing. Like you could say it's relatively benign, but it would send a shiver down my spine if he ever said that. If I ever got a DM from Pablo Torre and it said, hey, can you come on the podcast? I have some questions from you. I would be, I'd be team shitting bricks, to steal a term from the Mark Cuban podcast.
And that Epstein thing became, I think, part 4 of the NFLPA stuff, where he went behind the scenes of how the new interim executive director of the NFLPA was involved in some pretty weird cover-ups regarding child actors in the Hollywood Guild that he ran. So it's the worst post to receive in sports media right now is the like, hold on, I have questions for you, or let's talk from Pablo. If you first imagined yourself to be an opponent of his, and suddenly he's actually embracing you. You got a hot mic today, or are we good there, Ben?
I'll shout out the Zuffa boxing event over the weekend. It was interesting. I think it's going to be a big story. I think that TKO and Saudi Arabia are trying to bring the UFC model to boxing, and I thought the first event was pretty underwhelming. Our Ben Koo wrote about it on the website in terms of, and you referenced it at the start of the show, the main event didn't go on till like 1 a.m. Eastern time, wasn't over until well after that. I thought they missed some layups, so I'll be interested to see how that show performs and where it kind of goes from here.
I have some secondhand reporting that my stepdad is a salesman, and he was in Las Vegas last week, and he said that it was the most palpable energy for a fight that he could remember in a long time on the ground there. And he said $400 hotel rooms for starting Tuesday. Like, it was a pretty huge blowout thing there. So that's obviously a big sign too. You know, the TV and the viewership will be probably where the real money is made, but clearly it broke through, which is step 1 for them, and we'll see where it goes. They have their second fight scheduled, I believe, already, but I don't know if it's been sold to a broadcaster. I think the Netflix thing was kind of a one-off, and they're going to go fight by fight, right?
Well, they're trying to sell a media. This came out last week too. They're trying to sell a media rights package, which would be like, I think 12 to 16 fights a year. So it sounds like kind of monthly events, but then they'd still reserve the right to sell like these tentpole fights and these super fights separately. So it would be an interesting model in terms of what a media rights partner would actually even be buying.
Yeah. All the stuff that we're already telling you is lesser, but I mean, UFC does something a little similar, right? With the tiered programming, and so does WWE, I guess. So not out of the realm of normalcy, but yeah, obviously watch Paramount on that. I think they were connected already to Zuffa when the UFC deal came down, but that will wrap us up for the day. We'll be back tomorrow. We're here for you live 2 or 3 Eastern here on this YouTube channel, so hit follow or subscribe wherever you are finding the show. We got content galore. Of course, even more of it at awfulannouncing.com and across our social channels. Enjoy your Monday. We'll catch you tomorrow.